Hello.
Hello. Hi, Greg.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Nice to connect with you. Is it Greg or Gregory that you'd prefer?
Greg is good.
Great. Great.
I put
Well,
Gregory for some reason on everything. I don't know.
it's
I don't know how it worked out, but that's how it went.
okay. Well, whatever your friends call you, I'll call you Greg. Thanks for being here.
For sure.
I'm actually feeling like maybe it was more appropriate for us to get together independently and have this conversation. And
Awesome. Wow, I
that's
love the cat. Is that on your table too?
my cat. Yes. My cats are really big into the tuning, and so they feel like in
Nice.
space. And so I usually have one of them up there. But yeah, he's all tucked in.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Snowstorm, where are you?
I'm in Northern California, right up on the border, right
Okay.
under that borderline. I'm on the Klamath River in a little tiny town called Happy Camp that you probably
Happy
don't know
Camp.
about.
Wow.
It's you might have heard of the Klamath River because it's going it just was the largest dam removal in the nation that just happened recently. They took out a
Yeah.
bunch of dams.
Nice.
And so it's a free flowing river again, and we'll see. It's a lot. It's a being right here. Of course, I have more of a perspective of like all these different people who have different opinions about it, of course. So it's a but
Well, of course. Right.
yeah,
That's the world we're in right now.
for sure. Yeah, exactly. But today we're going to be talking all about biofield tuning and the Telepathy Tapes podcast. And yesterday I had a fantastic conversation with some other fellow tuners, and we were just able to connect on this topic that seemed to get everybody really excited. It went straight into the heart area. People were moved and felt inspired. And that's why I am reaching out to other tuners and other people that want to talk about this because I am inspired. I'm kind of I like to share information, and I think
Yeah.
maybe that's my role in biofield tuning is to just talk
Hmm.
about it more and normalize these conversations,
Yeah.
bring it together because we really need a bridge to bridge science and unseen realities and just really
Yeah.
embrace that there's already been so much research going
Right.
on with telepathy. I mean, MIT scientists are doing research, and there's just
Right.
papers all over the place when you start looking into it. So,
Right.
welcome. I'd like to hear a little bit about your background. Just give me a little brief bio. I'm excited to meet you because I've seen you all over our Facebook group.
Right.
But yeah, what do you do? How'd you get into biofield tuning? And let's start there.
Okay. Thanks for having me.
Mhm.
So yeah, how did I get into biofield tuning? It's I'll give you the super abbreviated. I think it started with a death experience.
Hmm.
Like I 24 almost 24 years ago, I got hit by a car
Uh-huh.
that ran a red doing 40 and I was on a bicycle
Ooh,
and I got thrown 100 feet from a windshield and it was a big hairy deal.
yeah.
Um, and I stayed conscious until I heard the sirens.
Mhm.
And when I heard sirens, I was like, "Oh, okay. I don't need to direct people to not move me because I figured my back was broken." I, I, I was an EMT at that time. I was like, "Oh, this is
Wow.
not. There's nothing about this is good."
Hmm.
And then when I was out, well, 10 years later, I got a Reiki session, and I had this experience where I was back at the accident,
Uh-huh.
except I was in that blissful space called being dead
Uh-huh.
that was awesome. It was like nothing like this. You can't use words to describe it because it's like, oh yeah, peace, but peace is like this little tiny piece of it.
Ah, uh-huh.
Um, and and then I was like, oh, I go up to the people of light, the beings of light up there. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm missing something. I turn, I look down below me 50 or 100 feet, and there's my body, except I'm in the lap of a woman. And the woman looks up at me, and I immediately know it's Mother Mary. And she communicates, doesn't have to talk, that your place is here, meaning my body. And so and then she shows me it wasn't a command, it was a this is her opinion, and then she showed me the rest of the like it's not going to be fun, and you're kind of a mess. Um, Amazingly,
Okay.
all kinds of miracles happened. I lived to the first miracle. The second miracle is the only thing that was broken was my left lower leg. So she said, "Go back." I went back. What did you say?
I said your spine was intact.
Yes, Yes,
Yeah.
they didn't know for a while, but because I was swollen, and so no, they did some CTs, but they couldn't really tell.
Hmm.
Yeah, nothing happened to that. Just my left lower leg, and the surgeon went to the OR and told my wife of 9 months, mind you, and the same wife I have today, that we're going to amputate his leg below the knee, and she's like, oh my God, that's my rock climbing partner. You're going to what?
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't think so. So he came out happy. I haven't had to amputate yet. Those were his words, and then the litany of all the things I'm never going to do, which was fill in all the blanks.
Sure.
Walk, yeah, no,
Sounds like you're
pretty
pretty
much everything's
athletic.
not on the right. So I was a science teacher at the time. I was in school getting basically the pre-med packet, and I was either going to apply to PA school or chiropractic or acupuncture,
Mhm.
and because I was open to all that, but I wasn't necessarily aware that I could be a business owner and do that. So I went to PA school. I did that for roughly, well, my license will have been active for 20 years in May. So I've been practicing medicine for, until the last, I don't know, 5-ish years, 2019 when I would move to Mexico. So there's where it shifted. I did PA stuff. I got some craniosacral during that time when I was recovering. I got some acupuncture. I got some traditional acupuncture. I was always open to, okay, it's not just one way through things. So in 2019, my son came to us and said at the very beginning of 2019, he said, "Hey, when you and Mom go overseas, I want to go with you because I want to learn Spanish." And we said, "Oh, great," because we were thinking when we launch him, we're going to go be expats. And I said, "Well, when are you thinking?" He said, "How about for senior year in 6 months?" It was like halfway through junior year, and we said, "Oh my!" And we said yes. So we sold our house. My wife sold her business. I got out of medicine, and we moved to Mexico where I couldn't be a PA. So my wife turned me on to Dispenza. Then I went to a Dispenza meditation retreat and had this like out of body experience, and fell on a beach and shook for a long time, and
Released a lot.
and then realized, oh, I can move energy with my hands when I went to a second one. So then I started doing energy training when we came back from Mexico. And that led to a series of serendipities and my mother-in-law mentioning biofield tuning is what you mentioned. My wife bought forks. I started ringing them, and I was like, "Holy wow, this is real. Let's do some of this." So,
Cool.
so that's how it all. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a beautiful story how that all came out of something that was extremely traumatic, and having that near-death experience it's so profound. Anybody that has one, it always just completely turns the
yeah,
direction. And
right.
so that place in between lives is fascinating. It reminds me, I've read a couple of books. There was I don't know his name. He published a couple of books about his clinical studies with in between lives. Super
Oh,
interesting.
is this the? Um, oh, there's some. Is he a neurosurgeon or a medical guy though? Right?
I need to
MD.
dig him up again. It's been so
Okay.
long. It's called Life. I think his book is called Life in Between Lives, and there's two of them. And it's just like
Mm,
a dialogue, the way it's written between him and his client.
okay.
And it's really beautiful. It actually ties in quite nicely with telepathy tapes and some of the accounts of what they were experiencing. So we just don't really have all the information, right, about how everything works. And so that's why we have to
For
maintain
sure.
this openness to and sort of humility. And yeah, so thank you for sharing how you got into biofield tuning. I know that I see you posting regularly, sharing what you do. It sounds like you're getting a wonderful response from the community,
Yeah.
offering that there, farmers
Yep.
markets and whatnot.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
Yep.
And so if you could go into maybe how it is that you've worked with autistic children. I mean, we covered the topic a little bit yesterday, kind of coming like nobody in the group has done that yet. And so
Mm.
um the initial thoughts here, of course, were that I would think that we follow some of the foundations of biofield tuning and the structure while having an adaptive openness per individual and keeping it more like a light touch, almost like working with animals and children where less is more. Maybe
Yeah.
just Earth Star, Sun Star. And yeah, so I'm so curious about what you're exploring in that field.
Okay. So I'm going to go back because my first experience with, and I'm going to make a distinction here, children with autism, because I have a child with diabetes. Since he was 4, he got diagnosed with type 1, and he's not a diabetic. He happens to be a person first, and then secondarily, oh, he has diabetes, and he's not defined by his disease. And so I don't know what people that are on the spectrum, how they refer to themselves. I was thinking about this today, and I was like, neuroatypical, which makes them atypical and us typical. And I was like, well, that's a load of crap. I mean, quite honestly, like, come on. Maybe maybe we're just dumb compared, from what the telepathy tapes talk about. Like, wow, they've got access to everything in the Akash and know multiple languages and know. I'm like,
right? Who's teaching who here is what's my
whoa,
question.
yeah, mm-hmm.
Which
Right,
is why it kind of needs to be flipped around, and we're the ones that need the education. How do
right,
we learn their language? Because they have different
yes,
software going on in there, and just because they
yes,
don't have electrical control over their physical bodies doesn't
yeah,
mean that they are not competent and fully conscious and aware. So this is just, it forces it to be turned around and
right,
flipped around, because we cannot help them otherwise. You just
yep.
putting them in a box and saying, I mean, it's just compartmentalized the way the system.
Behave
Yeah.
according to our
Yeah.
cultural standards. Like, so back to your point of it's kind of like tuning with animals. I had thought that same thing, and I was like, okay, do I really want to say that? Because I don't want to give the impression that, However, when I first started medicine, the first place I worked was a pediatric clinic, and so I did pediatrics for a year and a half.
Huh.
And the old school doc that I worked with, like this is the guy who he's the one who well, I diagnosed my kid with diabetes because I was like, hey, Bill, you're seeing Toby tomorrow for a well child check, but he's drinking and peeing a lot, and he was like, it got his attention. He was the guy who charted through every note or on his notes while I was talking about my patients, and he would answer appropriately while he was doing his.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
and this time he stopped typing. He
Mhm.
took his readers off. He pushed away from the computer, and I was like, "Oh shoot!" And and then all he did was dip my son's pee, and it had a load of sugar in it, and he sent him for labs, and all that stuff was art. And so his thing was pediatric medicine in the wee ones that aren't really verbal or are too shy to be verbal. It's like veterinary medicine
Yeah.
because you're relying on a story of somebody else, whether it's the owner or the adult in the room. So that was my introduction to medicine, and then I started having some parents would come in with kids with autism, and you've got to be really gentle would be the first thing, patient, and then back to this thing of you got to understand that it's not on my terms
Mhm.
how this is going to go. And the same as like when you tune a horse.
Yeah.
A horse is either going to, I've had some horses, they don't want anything to do with me. Okay, we're not doing that. We'll go with this one.
Right.
The one that hangs out and comes over and,
Mhm.
oh, okay, that, it's informed
Yeah,
consent and it's giving,
absolutely.
yeah,
It's what I
and so,
noticed with cats too. It's the very same thing. And my own
yep,
dogs, my animals. There's some of them are just like, yes, that's what I need, and they come in for it. They lean into
hmm
it, but they'll let you know exactly when they've had enough.
for sure.
You got to be sensitive to that. So absolutely, I hear that. There's sort of a trust building
Yeah,
happening at that very
right.
first stage, probably.
So my early time with folks with autism was in clinical practice, mostly with kids, and I would mostly hang out with moms and talk,
Hmm.
and maybe do some cursory exam, let them play with my stethoscope before I put it on their chest or on their back. I wouldn't go to ears because they're really no, that's not you can't you and eventually maybe, and
Hmm.
I'm talking like a year later.
Right.
Like, oh, he's got ear pain. I'm sure of it. He's digging around in there. A year in, Okay, buddy, what do you say? Can we look at that so we see if there's something going on?
Yeah.
And then they would, once they knew, oh, that's just Greg, he's not going to hurt me. And
Yeah,
I'm not going to hold him
exactly.
down and I'm not going to do anything to him.
Hmm.
But, oh, we just trying to get things figured out. And so I
Yeah.
feel like now I'm early into, or I would call it early into my work with kids with autism. So this is interesting. I heard the telepathy tapes. I'd listened to some of them. And in the midst of it, I got a reach out from a mom with a child with autism and asked me, "Hey, do you work with children or children on the spectrum?" I don't remember how she phrased it. And so we started a conversation. I was like listening to these, and I was like, "Wow, that's kind of interesting. This is a serendipity in there." And then we kind of left it. We stalled in our conversation because I wasn't sure. I was like, how long can a visit go? How long are my visits? This isn't quite what I do now. And so then I listened to episode 5, and I was so moved that I was like, ah, shoot, I gotta. And I reached back out to her and reestablished the conversation. And then a few days later, she brought him in, and she's now bringing him in weekly.
Oh,
And the first visit was just kind of him romping around my office.
mhm.
Oh, and here I'll give you a little view of
Yeah, it's beautiful. I've seen
this
pictures. It's so
space.
lovely. Yeah. I like the colors.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So he was basically it was a play session. Like he would get his hands on lots of things, and how's it to ring a gong or a tuning fork or what have you,
Sure.
or a bowl and exposing her to frequency, mom.
Mhm.
And then the next session was somewhat more of the same, but we actually went outside, and I brought a gong, and I just gonged while we were out in the sun, and because he's 4, this kid is,
Oh, very young. Yeah.
so he's young,
He's
he's
active.
quite active.
Yeah.
Do you call it distractible? I don't know. He's interested in a lot of things. He's like,
Yeah.
he'll pick something up, bring it over, ask a question, and then go get something else, and
Yeah. This,
which okay. And so I'm just doing frequency while he's like, he will get on the table for about, it's not a minute, it's seconds,
oh, wow. Yeah.
and then get off the table.
Mhm.
And mom has noticed, he's like, wow, feels really safe here. He'll close his eyes.
Ah,
And so he'll get on the table, put his head on the cradle, and close his eyes and hang out for a few seconds,
yeah.
and then get back down. I've not put anything on him yet, like a bowl or anything, or forks on him.
Yeah.
He's rang them
Hmm.
and feels them. He really likes dampening everything.
Oh,
Like, okay, it's a bowl. He'll put his hand on it. The gong. He's.
he likes closing the sound down with his hand.
Mhm. Yep,
Ah, wow.
yep, yep.
Cool.
Um, now, so I'm, like I say, early in. I'm
Yeah.
going into my third session tomorrow with this guy, and mom and I had a conversation, or a text thread, and she asked him what he thought about, what if he liked the sessions. He said yes. She's like, what do you most like about him? And he said him, meaning
Oh,
me.
wow.
Yeah. Which, so I think part of this to me is holding space
Mm.
and being okay with wherever the person is at, and just showing up. And it's interesting because of my sessions, those are some of my more tiring ones
More
because
tiring
it's
ones. Oh, yeah. I bet. Do you find his energy changes from start to end, like when he comes in versus after he leaves?
I'd say he's a little calmer,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that'll build, the
Yeah.
cumulative
You're
effect,
just
and he'll,
starting. You're barely
yeah,
starting. And then when we work with anybody with tuning, really, like you kind of,
yeah,
those first few sessions are your body and biofield is going, wow, what's this? It's new and
right,
acclimating to having sound come in that way so that it can
for
be
sure,
adjusted. So it's important to pay attention to those wherever they're at and knowing that it will continue to have the effects between sessions and he's going
right.
to let you know when he's ready for you to take in something new. I have a question about
Shoot.
mother and whether you talked with her, had considered if she were to receive a tuning session while he was in the room or something like
Well, for the first two, she was here.
that.
And so he was kind of doing his thing,
Yeah.
and I was working with her. And
Okay,
I
you were
was,
okay. Good.
I
Yeah.
mean, that was kind of the point. Back to
Gotcha.
kind of that's part of my pause with okay, in biofield tuning, I don't know that it's not a rule, but it's like suggested, tune the parents, and then the kids will. And
Mhm.
I don't know that this is true because of the difference in how brains work in this case,
Mhm.
right? However,
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah.
mom walks out definitely feeling better,
Hmm.
and is there now. What's also interesting is this week she keeps mixing it up, and I'm just open. I'm just like, okay, well, let's see how this goes. I'm game for all kinds of things,
Sure.
most everything, right? And she's like, how about if I just drop him off, and I'll be there's a courtyard just outside of my office. I'm on a
Oh,
mall, and I'll hang out there.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, and see what happens. And she's wanting to. I don't know what her intention with that is, but maybe give him a little autonomy, maybe give her a little space, and
Hmm.
that's fine with me. I mean, I used to be a teacher before I did when I had that whole car crash thing. I was
Yeah.
literally a middle and high school science
Oh,
teacher.
fun.
And so back to your comment, which takes me kind of back to the beginning of this, we're bridges. That was one of the comments I was going to make in here. Like I'm
Okay.
a bridge between standard allopathic, it's not standard, it's allopathic medicine
Yeah.
and energy medicine.
Yeah.
And
That's,
I get both those worlds. They are
oh
interwoven,
yeah. Yeah.
regardless of whether anybody in that allopathic realm believes it, or some do, like
Some
I did.
do. Yeah. It brings up a really good point that we talked about yesterday, which was, and so thank you for being in that position because we need more people like you who are coming from the world of licensure and PhDs and they're in it and who are seeing this stuff and it's moving them. It's moving
Yep.
them to be sort of infiltrate
Right.
into it. But that was something that had come up as being a challenge for especially somebody like who's not maybe a biofield tuner or anybody who works with energy who doesn't have those degrees and whatnot. And so we're kind of going, we can't even get through the door. We can't, they're like Reiki, biofield, get out of here, because it's not worth it to them. We've talked about the gatekeepers, and so they
Yeah.
have jobs. This is a real tension. There's a pulling of things, and at some point it's going to break. It has to, and so that's why we build the new ways of doing things. So
I
that's
would
exciting.
I would assert it is breaking, if not broken.
Yes. Yeah.
Um, and like it's interesting. It's interesting being in the position of I still am a licensed medical provider, right? I don't
Mhm.
use it. I don't. I
Mhm.
mean, I honestly don't have a supervising physician. I'm a PA, and you need a supervising physician in order to
Sure.
legally
Yeah.
do what you do. So I don't use it. I just do energy work,
Hmm.
biofield tuning, and other energy work. But I don't, well, I should say I don't officially use it because a lot of people ask me questions, and their questions are about, can you tell me what this MRI means?
Oh. Hmm.
Can
Hmm.
you tell me what? Yeah, I've read those for decades. I can totally tell you what the read on this. Oh,
Wow.
that's ominous, or oh, that's no big deal. Whatever. Don't that
Wow.
doesn't.
That's
And
very cool
so,
to have that background mixed in. It's so powerful. Yeah.
and back to your gatekeeper comment. One of the things I've been thinking about, because I have a license and because of all that,
Hmm.
I'm going to put together a packet for there's some entities that we work, or rather some conditions that we work with that biofield tuning really works well for, like neuropathy or sciatica,
Uh-huh.
and so I'm going to go to some medical offices and just, we could, you might try, like there's a cancer center right around the corner from me, to give them, you might send some people over here and see if it helps. Or I'll come in and do a demonstration, bring a couple of patients,
Yeah.
and but then another piece, what I found out in this whole tuning a child with autism, so the mom asked me for a receipt with some particular details to it. She apparently has funding for treatment for her child, and if it's referred by the pediatric occupational therapist, she can get reimbursed for his treatments coming to me
Oh, wow.
if there's a referral, and there's a
Okay.
referral.
Okay.
There's actually a POT, a pediatric occupational therapist, around the corner from me. I haven't met yet, but I'm gonna, and they're referring the child over
Wow.
to get tuning, and she's submitting, and maybe it's state by state how easy or difficult it is to get that reimbursement. But for your community, that's big, and that the telepathy tapes are talking about it, and that tuning forks are part of it. To me, it's like we're in a really cool place, and there's tremendous opportunities, and it can normalize what we do more because it's real and it
It's
helps.
so
And
real. Yeah.
I mean,
And it
at
helps.
farmers markets, how often do people feel better when I put forks in their shoulder
Oh
for
gosh. Yeah.
a
Doesn't take
minute?
it doesn't take long at all. It's phenomenal how fast it can
Right.
work actually with pain and the nerves. It's just
Yeah.
people need to I'm in the middle of a biology course right now through the college just
Mm.
for other reasons, but I'm looking at it with this new lens of like, whoa, the cellular function and the electric nature of our bodies is super fascinating. And how could you not get
Right.
it that when we use sound and frequency to heal something that's electronically responsive
Well, right. Yep.
to everything. And so it's, yeah, I think that this is a good, it brings a lot of hope into the conversation and the growth of it all, because it will change. And that's great to hear that you're getting this referral through the system. I think it's probably through things like that that's going to help make those bridges. And it takes you walking into that office and maybe making
Right.
a flyer and being able to talk about it. And more biofield tuners. I know it can be really challenging doing what we do and running it as a business as well, and
Right.
being able
Yeah.
to explain what you do. And it's been
Yeah.
challenging. I've only been doing it for a little over a year, but
Right.
because I'm so fascinated with the way it works and wanting to understand more about it and wanting to bridge those realities together, I can't help but just talk. I'm going to write articles and share and interview people and keep pumping it out there, amplifying these topics and exposing them more and more. Um, so yeah, we
I
could
love
get, I
it.
mean, that you have that biology background. I'm thinking like, I'm going to talk and see if you have looked into any of these studies, and we can, if we have time, but there's mirror neurons, parahippocampal gyrus, the cryptochrome in the eyes, magnetite, crystalline magnetite, and iron
Right. Right.
in the
Right.
brain,
Yep.
so we can sense magnetic fields.
Yeah.
What do you say about all that stuff?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a lot of topics. I'm more familiar with the magnetite.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the so I'm going to back up a minute. So I came from this system where you go through medical education, and it's an education come indoctrination. And I came out of it not necessarily fully understanding how indoctrinated I was. And then when I stepped out of it and I was in Mexico, and then COVID happened, and I was still plugged into regular news up here through the New York Times.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started reading articles. I was like, hang on, this article would be a grand rounds study at the residency I just left. Why is it in the newspaper? They're talking about a teenager dying, and the headline was "Teenager Dies of COVID." And I was like, they're just fear mongering us. And that got me kind of on. I mean, I was already had some questions and
Mm-hmm.
like in the midst of number 20, and there was, I don't know, close to 1,000 people in a room, and nobody had masks on, and it was fine. And and then in retrospect, Dispenza says, "Oh, yeah, we can make the things we need to from our own pharmacopoeia within us through deep meditation." And it's basically terrain theory. Coming back to your question, okay, contagion, like for me, it's more like contagion versus terrain.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm moving towards the, oh yeah, well, I think it's somewhat yes and
Sure.
And I don't know, my wife is of the mind, she's like, okay, contagion doesn't exist, she says, but then, all right, I don't know, that's sort of a curious thing. Magnetite, and back to that, and magnetics, and knowing where true north is. Yeah, there's something to that. There's studies that show that. I mean, people, yeah, and look at bees, for crying out loud, or look at migratory animals or insects. Like the grandchild of a monarch butterfly flies from Canada down to
Right?
Michoacan. I went and saw the butterflies in Michoacan in Mexico when
Yeah.
we lived there. The pine tree boughs were sagging from the weight of butterflies.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
and it's the grandchildren of who, like, who were there that many generations back,
Yeah.
and yet they know how to get to the same trees, and they do it
Right?
every year.
Yeah.
Like, okay, well, understand. And I think that comes back to, okay, there's a lot, the biology of all of this.
Hmm.
Well, I like to look at us now as, okay, we are not a biochemistry, and we are not just a machine that has levers and is,
Right.
where's an energetic, and it's not overlay, it's woven through.
Yeah.
We're interwoven with all of it.
Exactly.
And so what's the truth of it, and what are the studies? Well, and then who's publishing the studies, and where's the money come from?
Sure.
Because
Always
that's
gotta
the
look at
other, the other unfortunate question or reality of the system right now.
So true. So true. Because you could have all the studies in the world fund something that's, completely toxic and terrible for the human. But as we've learned throughout history. So
Did I answer your question? I'm
I
not
think
sure if
so.
I.
It was just like, hey, what do you think of this? Because it is a big ball of wax, right? All these different studies, and I haven't looked into it super deeply. I thought maybe, if you had something that disturbed something in your brain about it, but I just wanted to speak to it because it has to do with the brain and using tuning forks again, and how that can really at its like fundamental level be working on that signaling that's happening
Yeah.
in the brain waves. And so
Right.
if we can get the whole, how do we bring, like in the episode 5, and the boy with the tuning fork saying one is my body and one is my soul, my light body, or I'm not sure what he said exactly, but he was expressing that they needed to come together. And so I know that we're at the very beginning of this, and we're at this exploration, play, and trust phase of just kind of getting started working with them. But like you're saying, it'll probably develop over time. If there is a particular technique or protocol or way to do it, you would certainly be involved in the forerunners of putting
Right.
together that information. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So the reason I talked about indoctrination was because, okay, I've gone through all of the trainings that Eileen offers.
Yeah.
And then you're out there doing it all day, every day, right? And I'm realizing, okay, I'm doing a fair amount of bike riding these days because it's a 20-mile commute each way to my office. So I'm doing that probably 3 days a week, which, okay, so it's an hour each way. I've got some time, so I'm listening to her book. I've listened to her books on a couple times. And one of the things that I realized I'm really enjoying is the exploration. And so I'm not necessarily availing myself to all the frequency medicine papers or books, or like I've got a list of books and I'm like gradually buying some here and there. But I'm exploring in a more true way to me as a human explorer in the biofield, as opposed to as a open the fire hose and here's the things you need to know to pass your certification exam.
Totally. Yeah.
Which is what I did before.
Sure.
And it was like, oh yeah, that was effective for that. But then when I left medicine, I got in touch with all the rest of the information they never mentioned. Like, oh, diabetes is completely reversible if you adopt the appropriate lifestyle. And it looked like this, and this, which now is much more talked about, which I was talking to my patients about along the way, because I had a kid with diabetes, and I saw all the nuance to that, like, oh, everything affects blood sugars.
Yeah.
Stress affects blood sugar.
You don't have
There's
to
all
eat
these
anything.
things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Without even. Right. Exactly. No. Growth hormone. Whoa. That kid's growing. Look at how do I can't control his blood sugars. Like, as a real example. That happened. He'd be like super hungry. His sugars would be great at bedtime. He hadn't eaten a big meal, and then they're high all night. Like
Yeah.
we're,
Yeah.
that's pushing out growth hormone so he can grow.
Wow.
So all that is to say, like, exploration of it, and then it's not that I mean, I don't know, I don't think of myself as a cowboy, although I did grow up on a ranch in Arizona, but a cowboy in the sense of going out and being wild, and it's just I like the exploration, and I like the coming up to the what do I know about this, what do I not, what am I feeling, what am I sensing into. That piece is and I feel like there's a wide permission field, specifically from Eileen and in biofield tuning of, oh, figure it out. It's yours to figure out because you've got your own particular gift in it.
Yeah.
And so that's been super. So that's why I was kind of laying all that. Like I'm kind of coming back to, okay, I want to know more about specifically kind of the musical pieces of it and the sacred geometry pieces of it. That's fascinating to me. The frequency they talk about in gene keys. I don't know if you're familiar with the gene keys.
A little bit. I have a friend who's deeply into
I'm rather into it, and comes back to frequency again and again and again, and that everything is ultimately frequency, and so that's interesting. Like I'm trying to find what's the truth for me.
Oh, that's what everybody has to do, right? And it takes the ability to give yourself the permission to explore. And like you're saying, what Eileen teaches in many ways is for you to reconnect with that innate curiosity, childlike wonder, because we become so conditioned and indoctrinated, whether it's through science, academia, or religion, or what have you, and just what we've been told. We've been so programmed. And so when we allow ourselves playful exploration and a lots of things, that's how Eileen found biofield tuning, was through her own curiosity, of course. And so I am with you on that. I like, trying to follow her protocols, and I stick with that foundationally pretty much, but I'm super open to exploring tuning forks and all kinds of other crossover paths, whether it be with tuning my cats or tuning places, businesses, spaces, tuning while doing yoga, tuning my art, tuning while I'm journaling, tuning, just kind of crosses over, tuning my plants, tuning seeds, electroculture. I mean, there's so many tuning branches into different things. I mean, you can tune anything that has an electromagnetic field, an organism, especially a living organism. So it's exciting. We are kind of forerunners with Eileen because she's a pioneer, and we're kind of like, it's a small group of people that relatively in the world that
for sure. And when you think about how many tens of thousands are graduating from medical schools every year compared to the few, the dozens of tuners.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I agree. And so we had a tuner yesterday that was coming in from France and speaking about how it's even in other countries, it's more difficult and challenging than here in America because the literature isn't translated in every language yet. And it's just not as well talked about and known. So, so I'm going to share
It's interesting. It's interesting that in Europe because I went to Italy and Spain this summer, and we went to, in Italy, probably the highlight of probably the whole trip was, have you heard of Grata Sonora, the gong makers?
Not specifically, no.
So they make, here, I'll turn my computer again, sorry about they make gongs. This is a little 19-inch handheld gong, and I'll give you a sample.
Sure.
Because it's so wonderful.
Thank you.
And so we went to their gong shop and picked up not one, not two, but 4 gongs. I had 4 gongs shipped home. The most amazing of which was a 42-inch gong you sit or lay down in.
Oh, wow.
And it's wild. It's like, talk about a frequency experience.
I'm coming to visit you, Greg. I'm going to come down
here. It's something else. That gong is So anyway, they said, yeah, how's it being accepted as a frequency medicine worker? And I do feel like I'm out. I was just kind of adding up how many farmers markets I've done since August when I got this new space. I've been to, I think, 20 since
Wow.
August, because it's every week, and so I go most every week. I'm routinely there,
Wow.
and I'm having conversations, usually probably 10 or 15 conversations every farmer's market.
Wow.
And I get some people on my list, and all the thing, which it sharpens my delivery, and
Right.
it hones my message, and and people are interested. People are walking by like, freak, sound therapy. What's that? Funny you should ask. And step into what your next thing is, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's easy to talk
So,
about something you love too.
well, for sure. Yeah, exactly. And that it's something that's, I think I wrote tens of thousands of prescriptions in my career, and not a one of them was benign. Not a one. You can't say that. There's no such thing as a pharmaceutical that doesn't have a litany of effects.
Right.
There's 50 or 100 effects to every
Yeah.
pharmaceutical. And admittedly, in frequency, there's a litany of effects. Most of them are positive, with the exception of maybe if you have a healing crisis. Okay, and that's even positive. Ultimately, when you down the road, when you come back in and we'll get you straightened out. But it's not this. It's not this. You can't. That's comparing apples and oranges.
Right.
That
Right. It really is, because the long-term effects of those other side effects might be permanent. Whereas really the other effect is kind of like going through a fever or something, or it's just stimulating an inflammation that's a positive response, like you're saying.
right. Healing. I mean, really, a healing crisis, not it's causing more symptoms that you need more medicines to treat
Right.
than they're on.
No, it's I was explaining it to my husband. It's very similar to sort of lancing a wound or opening up something that's been really calloused over. You haven't been getting there. Nothing's been getting in. So you open it and you're vulnerable for a while. There's this
Right.
exposure and it's still sensitive to, to touch while it's in, yeah.
You just made me think of, this is more of a climbing metaphor, but maybe people with corns or things on their feet. If you trim down callus and you go too far and it's really sensitive, it's
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I can go underneath it.
Yeah.
So it
And you
can,
don't even have to go that far, just like to where the nerves are like, oh, I don't want to go grab a spiky piece of granite just yet,
no, no. Yeah.
or put a shoe on or whatever, right?
Yeah, it is similar when we look at the biofield anatomy and it's just so interwoven with the way our body systems are. The nervous system, I theorize, is actually reaching out its tentacles into the biofield and maybe even into the cosmos. Who knows? We have filaments of our nervous system that can connect all over.
Right.
So fascinating topic. I want to make sure we cover everything. I don't want to hold you up for too long. There was one more little thing I want to share with you, but I want to make sure you get all your points that you'd like to express.
Shoot. Well, shoot. There were some questions you asked before that I'm going to put my readers on so I can see what I wrote down. You had asked about most important themes from the telepathy tapes, and I think this is way bigger than telepathy tapes, because the most important theme is love, really.
Yep.
And that to me, like, as you get through the latter episodes, okay, for sure. And that's what drew me to tuning, and what drew me to energy work was, okay, I can't really show up as a loving human and be trying to get out of the room as quick as I can by writing a prescription and rolling, rather than, okay, tell me about your pain,
Yeah.
and then on the table and help you metabolize it.
Yeah. That's so different.
The other is trust as an important theme, and I started to flesh out what I was going to say, and then I dropped it. But there's something new happening, and I mean, I think it's kind of like Dispenza, the stepping into the unknown. We got to trust that we're held and we're caught, and it seems empty, but it's really not. we've got to just go. I mean, it's not blind faith either, which I feel like that there maybe needs to be faith, but there's this trust thing in there that it keeps working out. Like, yeah, I moved my clinic or my office, my studio from down my house into back up to Green Valley because it was an opportunity. It was on a farmer's market. I was like, okay, that'll be really good for visibility. And nobody knows about sound therapy. Okay, let's do this thing and see what happens. So I'm just trusting. Am I going to be able to cover the rent and all the other things I'm covering? I hope so. I'm trusting that I will. I keep showing up. You asked if we bring questions about telepathy tapes. And so I have a couple.
Oh, cool.
The first was, how might the telepathy tapes themselves and biofield tuning shift the current paradigm around folks living with autism? And then, how might systems change and evolve to incorporate folks with autism into society better? And those are like, it's the big, because you think we're locking people up in prisons. They're already locked up in the prison of their body, and we put them in some other prison that is, like group home housing, can't be, and here they are, extraordinary. I mean, everybody's an extraordinary human, and these people have extraordinary abilities that we just don't know about. Like, wow, I mean, I think that's part of the probably grand cover-up, is because somebody knew it for a really long time and
Absolutely, yeah.
did anything. And that's my like, how do we stand strong and say, okay, this has got to change?
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you on those fundamental key questions, really important. And I think it's true. It's not just relating to the telepathy tapes or even just autistic people and what's going on with them, but it's this broader kind of percolation, wanting to blow the cap off of something, that just it forces it to shift. So this conversation being broadcast is part of that. And I reach out to people like yourself who have connections and like great answers as to what we can do, which is to just walk in the room and start talking to people and just. And what you're saying about the heart is so important, because you'll feel that trust and guidance and heartfelt tugging on you, like what to do, right? Just like I felt the need, like I got to write about this and bring these biofield tuners and talk to them. But whatever other little micro inspirations that happen throughout the day, that just like you're saying, building the trust and knowing that when your light is on, like for service, like that's kind of the way I see it, is like, I'm available for humanity, for the earth, and for helping.
Right.
Please put me to work.
Yeah.
So you trust those things come up, and then what happens, we have to be very strong and powerful and super courageous, because a lot of people are still like, I don't want to be seen. I don't want to be part of the world. I don't want in my body, and so people who are finding themselves becoming more anchored inside themselves and turning lights on are going to be the ones who connect to the right people at the right time. And it's just going to happen probably in these little mini networks, and then it'll bloom into bigger things in different locations.
I think so. Yeah. It's interesting, because part of the reason I spoke about my doubter came online in the beginning, before I started working with this kid, and it was I don't do 30-minute visits. I don't work with kids. It was all these, I don't, can't, won't, and like, hang on. And then I got opened up, like and I was like, okay, here's a serendipity, and they're bringing this kid. Like, I was driving and listening to that, and I started crying so hard I couldn't drive.
Oh,
like,
right?
And I was like, and I either called or texted the mom, like, okay, well, let's do this thing. It was so, it was like, okay, I'm listening. Like, I feel like the me getting hit by a car was I didn't listen to the nudges along the way, and so they got strong. they got a lot. I'm like, okay, my heart's open. And I'm like, oh, I'm bursting into tears because of a podcast that has meaning. Okay, pull the car over,
Yeah.
do what you got to do,
Oh
get
my
out
God.
back online and
Yeah.
get out there and do what I'm here to do.
Sure. Oh, I love that. Gave me chills, Greg. Yeah, get out there and do what you need to do, because that's the motivating force right there. The love force, the unifying force. I shared a quote with the folks yesterday, and you'll see it when I post the video, but it's from Albert Einstein. And it's a letter to his daughter. You can look it up and read it. It's so beautiful. It'll probably make you cry again. But he
Mm,
talks about how that's the force. That is the force that brings and holds it all together. It's the great attractor and the unifying force of love. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I think it's a wonderful place to maybe leave this conversation if you're feeling complete. The one other little thing I will share with you is something that came up in our conversation about a concept of forming a group of people, tuners, and those who have that pure heart intention of connecting in this way, but creating a sound space, a healing space that's non-local, and practice our abilities, telepathic, practice maybe creating a sound space that's similar to the hill as an invitation that they can visit us, because I know a lot of people are so intrigued with the hill, and I'm thinking, let's not try to go there and do any tuning or whatnot, but maybe if we set up a spot, I don't know what that would look like yet or anything. It's just at that initial inspiration, but I'm going to put that out there for you to think about as well.
I love that. Yeah, it's interesting to think that'd be a way to offer something to that community. And it just requires, oh, every Monday, whoever can show up,
Yeah.
or whatever, every Friday
Yeah.
evening, we're gonna,
We'll have a session.
yeah, and we'll either maybe we do it on Zoom or maybe otherwise, but like, okay, we can all bring our frequency jam and we can have a jam, right?
Yeah, it would be super cool to do it, maybe a little study experiment, maybe not on Zoom and on Zoom, but just have a designated time of day where we're all going to connect, and then maybe check in afterwards to share, like, what were you we would probably be amazed at how much there would be syncing up of what's happening. So
Right. Be
it's
cool to check in
exploratory.
after and see what people are,
Yeah.
feeling and bring and what was tuned. It's been interesting. I do basically, okay, it varies, but these days I'm doing 4 or 5 group tunings a month,
Wow.
and the I've been having more and more of my group tunings pulling in collective and bigger. It feels bigger, and
Mm.
I'm just showing up, right? I'm doing my thing, and I'm like, wow, that's a lot bigger than this X number of people in the room. Or, I do two a month online and 2 a month in person, and then some other go out and give away tunings because it gets the word out there more, right? Showing up, giving stuff away, talking about it. So the the I it's interesting with that as an idea. How big of a collective would we reach?
Right.
And it could be ginormous, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think it would involve some delicate collaborative planning with everybody so that we have we're on the same page and can sync up appropriately with our intentions of what that space is all about. So
Yeah,
it's going to take some more conversations and setting the groundwork for it, but there's a lot of potential for it to be
love it.
phenomenally expansive for everybody in many different ways.
Yeah, I love it. I wanted to just reiterate, when tuning with folks with autism, go slow.
Yes.
Let them be the boss of the session.
Mm-hmm.
Build trust,
Mm-hmm.
and that takes time. The certainly as a I didn't really wear a white coat ever, but I could have if I had I have some white coats laying around. But as a white coat wearing medical person, like, I had so much better, like in pediatrics, you listen to you watch the kid and you listen to the kid, and the kid, like, kids for me always stayed in mom's lap.
Mm-hmm.
That's the rule. Like, unless you want to have a really crappy day and have everybody crying when you do your job is to work with crying children. So the kids I worked in, they didn't cry.
No, they had their
Mom
comfort.
held them so you could look in their ears. They didn't cry
Yeah.
because the mom was holding them. It wasn't like your MA in there
Right.
pushing them into a sterile table and crunchy paper.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no, it's just mom. Oh, I get to be held by mom. Oh, it's really tight, and you get really fast. So that it's like all of that.
Mm-hmm.
Work with your skill set. What's your skill set? Oh, like one of my skill sets is I can make people feel comfortable in a matter of it's seconds,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm good at that anyway. But then I practice a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, same thing for my distinction between a neuroatypical or okay someone with autism. It's like we're all part of the same spectrum. We're all in the spectrum.
I like
We're
that.
all, it's like oh yeah,
Yeah.
we're all humanity. How do we be more
Exactly.
human?
Oh, that's great. Yeah, it's we too easily compartmentalize things and want to categorize and label and all of that stuff. And so yes, we're all on the spectrum. So true, but to different
You
degrees.
for sure. And you said something. It's in this. There was in the telepathy tapes, scientific materialism and reductionism,
Mm-hmm.
and like that's the problem.
Mm.
Is we're trying to chunk things down into when in fact we're all connected, and perhaps we're all just one, and we're having an experience of the oneness through our own lenses
That's
here
what
today.
it takes you to, when you start looking into all this, there's really one light, the one divided light, and we're all a part of that. I 100% agree with you. And it takes, and you can say something like that and it rolls out of the mouth nice and easy, or maybe hear somebody else say it and whatever. And then there's the other experience of like, well, what does that even mean? How do I feel when I, say that? Is it true? Or how can I experience that sensation? Well, there's techniques and methods, and that's where quieting your whole system down and coming into that listening to very intently. Biofield tuning teaches you to listen in a whole other way. And so, yeah, that's a really good point, Greg. Thank you for sharing everything today. I really had a wonderful time chatting with you, and we can talk any other time that you'd like about your experiences with biofield tuning, group sessions, and what else you're exploring and uncovering.
One last thing.
Yes.
I offered a group tuning for moms of kids with autism
Ah,
to
okay.
this mom, and I was like, you probably know some other moms, and I'm going to go to the pediatric occupational therapist, and I was like, well, there's a cool way and once moms trust you,
Yeah.
then you've got like 90% of the job done, because then kids are going to be
Yeah.
the term that comes to mind is compliant, but that's not what I'm after. Is they're going to trust you because mom trust. Oh, big space. Okay.
Oh, that's a beautiful idea to have it go through that channel, because when moms get together too, they're going to share like, check this out. And then that's trust, because it's coming from someone that they already trust. And so
Yes.
we're trust bridging and building.
Right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cool.
So thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. It was a pleasure to meet you and chat with you.
Pleasure.
All right. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day out there in Arizona.